Kaiju is a Japanese term meaning strange creature, but the word has been adopted in other countries to basically translate as giant monster. Kaiju films have been a highly successful staple of Eastern cinema since the 1950s. But for some reason, they have never been a consistent hit with Western audiences. Many of America's attempts to recreate the giant monster genre have failed. While many of the most successful kaiju films in America have simply been edits or dubs of popular films made abroad, such as the most famous franchise, Godzilla. Although the genre has never taken hold in American pop culture like it has in Japan and other Eastern countries, there have still been some simply incredible films that were made in America. In this video we mention the 10 best. 1. King Kong. The original 1933 film is one of the most notable cinematic feats of all time and probably most responsible for the existence of the rest of this list. Both remakes, and the more recent reinvention within the MonsterVerse, are impressive films that stand up to some of the genre's best in their own way. King Kong, the quintessential American monster movie, is quite the journey through time. A slow-paced film about exploration, survival, fame, and hubris. Kong set the standard for what monster movies could be and is the reason the genre is still today inherently tied to bombastic metaphors and cultural satire. All the King Kong films have marked cinema in their own way, and the ape himself is, along with Godzilla, the best-known giant monster in fiction. You may think that putting together all the Kong movies in this position is something unworthy for some incarnations, but if you didn't, more than half of the top would be focused on his movies, and there are still many other kaijus that are worth mentioning. 2. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, 1953. Arguably the most important American kaiju film, this story about a giant reptilian beast that washes ashore and causes destruction was released a year before Godzilla made his debut in Japan. The film's plot even revolved around a nuclear test that awakened the creature before it set its sights on New York City. While not technically as impressive as many of the films that followed it, The Beast clearly had a major influence on the most famous monster of all time and deserves at least partial credit for the kaiju boom that would occur in the following decade. To this day, several studios have tried to produce a remake of this film, but unfortunately it has not come to fruition. 3. It Came from Beneath the Sea, 1955. When a giant octopus-like creature is awakened by nuclear testing, it heads to the San Francisco coast to unleash its wrath on the city. The film was basically designed as an excuse to show off the new stop-motion effects created by special effects legend Ray Harryhausen. The film is fascinating, as it uses nuclear paranoia as a fear-mongering tool in a better way than The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Much of the film's footage almost looks like US Army propaganda videos. When the creature finally attacks, the scene is fantastic. The effects are clearly better than in the previous films and make the ending a technical feat, the most notable sequence being the monster that tears down the Golden Gate Bridge. In terms of quality, this film had nothing to envy of the Godzilla films. 4. Q. The Winged Serpent, 1982. The king of B-movies, Larry Cohen, knew how to do what he wanted with very little money. The fact that he took that mentality and used it to make a kaiju movie was a blessing. Q. The Winged Serpent had a very low budget and still manages to show us the best of kaiju movies. But most importantly, it brings with it all the idiosyncrasies that make Cohen's films so enjoyable, including the humor, satire, sentiment, and strange characters that fans of his films love. The film is a shoddy film production of the highest possible standard and has deservedly achieved cult classic status. As they often say in the media, it's so bad it's good. 5. Tremors, 1990. The cult classic about giant sandworms is perhaps the most intrinsically American film on the list. While the first half presents the enormous mutant worms as an inescapable threat, the armed natives of this small Nevada town won't give up without a fight. With fun performances from Kevin Bacon and the rest of the cast, the film never takes itself too seriously and knows how to play with the audience's expectations. Every time it seems that the plot is going in one direction or that a character is about to disappear, the script surprises us with something different. This movie could be classified as a parody of the kaiju genre, but it is really fun, especially if you are a fan of the classic Godzilla movies. 6. Cloverfield, 2008. J.J. Abrams and Company's found-footage monster movie was born out of a need to give America a monster it could truly call its own. The Bad Robot team pulled it off, making a film that captures the intensity of mass destruction better than any kaiju film before or since. With the basic story of a group crossing a New York City under attack to rescue a friend, the film relies on frenetic camera movement, chaotic energy and brief glimpses of an inexplicable creature to create an experience like no other in the genre. The film never stops to explain itself to the characters or the viewer. And in the end it leaves nothing but a masterfully crafted feeling of anxiety and wonder. Although the film may not seem like a big deal to fans of sagas like VHS or Blake's Witch, it is a breath of fresh air for kaiju fans and will surely leave them wanting to see how the story continues. 7. Pacific Rim, 2013. Guillermo del Toro's action universe doesn't try to Americanize the kaiju genre, but simply copies the things he likes about it. The film plays out like a live-action anime, without fear of being too weird or over the top. Pacific Rim is a love letter to the genre. It's actually very good and has some of the best visual effects of the kaiju's movies seen so far. A real shame that its sequel is so disappointing. The plot is very simple. Specially trained pilots and their giant robotic combat suits are the last line of defense against the enormous kaiju that come from the Earth's core. The film feels like a classic monster movie with modern effects. Additionally, while Pacific Rim doesn't ignore the subtext-laden human drama that drives the story of most kaiju movies, Pacific Rim is a great kaiju franchise that unfortunately they have not been able to exploit. 8. Godzilla, 2014. While the film had the two distinct advantages of featuring the most popular kaiju of all time, as well as being able to easily surpass the 1998 version, it still shined as a reintroduction of kaiju films to modern audiences. The film isn't perfect and suffers from some weak human characters, but it knew exactly how to portray Godzilla as the giant that he is. There are sequences throughout the film that inspire awe and give the viewer even the slightest idea of what these things would be like in real life, and the response is terrifying. The skydiving scene, in particular, is a brilliant display of how humans try to find their place among these enormous beings and kicks off a finale that showcases an excellent monster-on-monster massacre. 2014's Godzilla not only showed us that it was possible to adapt Godzilla in America, but it started an entire cinematic universe of kaijus, or titans in this case, which continues to bring us new installments and new characters to this day. 9. Colossal, 2016. Colossal is a film that understands that the root of the kaiju genre is to use the monster as a metaphor and does so to the fullest. The plot is a much calmer version of giant monster stories and follows a young girl struggling to discover that she is inexplicably controlling a giant monster running amok on the other side of the world. The film tackles adulthood, purpose and addiction better than most traditional dramas and still includes some humor and weirdness. If we add to that the stellar performances of Anne Hathaway and Jason Sudeikis, we have perhaps the best kaiju movie on this list. It's also worth noting that the film was a joint project between American, Canadian and Spanish production companies, so it was made with multiple points of view and can easily work with most casual audiences. 10. Rampage, 2018. The biggest mistake American audiences make when it comes to kaiju movies is going in wanting to watch gigantic monsters punch each other for 2 hours. The genre has always been loaded with political satire, and the creatures are almost always relegated to the background compared to the human melodrama at hand. Luckily, for those who still want their fill of pure monster madness, there is Rampage. The video game adaptation starring Dwayne Johnson is a run-of-the-mill box office hit. But it still belongs on this list as it's so common to see audiences wanting to see real giant fights instead of meetings in an office. The film is an average film overall, but it would certainly be a very exciting film for less demanding fans of the genre. With the success of the MonsterVerse, it's only natural that Hollywood would try to replicate the phenomenon that is Godzilla, so we're sure to see more giant monsters in the near future. Tell us if you have already seen all the films on this list and which one you consider to be the best kaiju film made by the United States.